All right, guys, in this video, we're going to take a look at factoring cubics in DeltaMath. Now, we are going to particularly look at the normal way, I'll say the normal way of factoring cubics, which is to break it into two binomials, and then try to figure out, using some factors and things like that, what goes into each binomial. If that doesn't make a lot of sense, just kind of follow along here, and I think you'll recognize this as we walk through it. So, first thing that we should do when we walk into a problem like this, we're asked to factor a cubic, and a cubic means there's three terms. Binomial means there's two terms in our polynomial. The first thing we should probably do here is we should probably order it with highest degree on the left, lowest degree on the right. So I can reorder this to x cubed plus, and that's negative 2x cubed because the negative travels with the 2x cubed, plus 20x squared minus 32x. All right. Now, the second thing I would do at this point is I would see if there's a common factor in all three of the terms. So I notice that I can divide out 2 out of all three terms. I can divide out of x out of all three terms. And really, I think what I'm going to do here, so that I don't have a negative at the front, is I'm going to divide negative 2x out of all three terms. I would rather if my first term were positive. It's going to make our lives a little bit easier here. So I recognize that this is equal to negative 2x times, now we've got x squared plus 10x minus, or I'm sorry, let me back that up. We've got x squared, sorry, I forgot to divide by a negative, sorry about that, minus 10x plus, that's going to be 16. All right, now at this point, I've got the negative 2x. Let's go ahead and put that in here into my equation, negative 2x. Now what I want to do is I want to break this thing up. I want to break this into x plus or minus something, right? We want something right here, x plus or minus something, y, and then this other x plus or minus something. Now, when we factor these things, we want to think in terms of a, b, and c, and this is what I mean by that. Our polynomials follow this kind of pattern, particularly when we're dealing with trinomials with a power of 2. So a x squared plus b x plus c. Now, the whole idea is that I'm going to break this up into two binomials, where I multiply by x on both of them. Now, for all of the problems in this DeltaMath, this a value is going to equal 1. So we can actually largely just ignore the a value. So really what we're focused on is b and c. Now we know that the two values here need to multiply together to make c, but add together to make b. So let's take a look at this 10 and 16. So if I'm thinking about 16, I want to think about what are my factors of 16, or what can multiply together to make 16. So I could do 1 and 16, I could do 2 and 8, I could do 4 and 4. Those are all the different factors that I have, all right? Now, what about things? Now I look at that list and I notice that it's also positive. So it could be more than just a positive times a positive, right? I could also have negatives times a negative. So this actually gets us a new list. Negative 1 and negative 16, negative 2 and negative 8, and negative 4 and negative 4. Now, this actually becomes really helpful because those are my c values, right? Multiply to c, add to b. Now, I want to add these up to equal 10. And so if I add negative 1 and 16, negative 16, I get negative 17. Here's my negative 10 at negative 2 and negative 8, and then negative 8. So see what multiplies together to make c, and then see which one of those pairs adds up to be your b value. So in this case, my final answer, I'm going to use the negative 2 and negative 8. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so this is going to be x minus 2 and x minus 8. Okay? And if I think about it, negative 2 times negative 8, that adds up to, or multiplies to 16, and then adds up to negative 10. All right, and so let's go ahead and submit this answer. Look, and that looks good. Okay, and they kind of walk you through the process here. Now, one thing to notice here is that they don't necessarily walk you through the factoring step. They just assume that you're able to do that factoring. All right. So let's take a look at. So that's the factoring one. It works pretty much the same way for all of them. Let's look at one more here. Now, in this skill, it's factoring cubics, but notice it says equation because they set it equal to 0. So they're not just asking you to factor it. What they would also like is they would like for you to solve it as well. So let's go ahead, let's rearrange this just like we rearranged the last one. So we're taking all the same steps as before. 14x squared minus 48x. I notice I can pull an x out of all three of these, so I know that right here I'm going to start with an x before I get into anything else. So we factor out an x, so my new equation now is x times x squared. I just totally missed the negative there, didn't I? That should be a negative x cubed. All right, so let's make this a negative x. Sorry about that. I just totally slipped my mind again. I'm not sure. I pay a little more attention here. All right, so let's go ahead and go back. So this is a negative x out in front. So I'm going to divide by negative x. So I get positive x squared minus 14x plus, what do we get? 48. Okay, so let's go ahead and factor this thing out. So I know I'm going to get negative x times x, and then times x. Now, if I think about this, if I need two things to multiply to be a positive and then add up to a negative, I know I'm going negative and negative in here. So that's one thing that you can do. If this 48 were a negative 48, then what we'd end up looking for is a positive and a negative. So that does kind of tip you off to where you're headed. So now 48 has a lot of factors, right? So let's go ahead and list those here. So 48, what can multiply together to 48? Well, 1 and 48, and we know these are all negative, right? Because we know we're not doing the positives. Negative 2 and negative 24. Can 3 divide in? Yes, 3 can divide in, so negative 3 and negative 16. Now, I want these to add up to negative 14. I've noticed all of these numbers are already too big to be, if I were to add them up. So that also kind of clues you in. So let's see the negative 4 and the negative 12. That's close, but not quite. It's probably the next one here. Negative 6 and negative 8. And yeah, that's going to work for us. Negative 6 times negative 8 gets us 48, adds up to negative 14. So I'm going to have minus 6, minus 8 as my answers. Okay, now, hang on a second. I also made a mistake here. We don't need to actually type that in. Now, what they're looking for as an answer is not this factored out form. They actually want us to solve the equation, which means what are the x values that make this true? What are the x values that make this go to 0? Now, one of the things we know is that when we're multiplying numbers together, if any one of those numbers, you can have a list of 100 numbers, any one of those numbers is a 0, the whole thing goes to 0. So really what we want to do is say, how do I make this go to 0? Well, if any one of the multiplied terms goes to 0, then the whole thing's going to be 0. So this negative x out front, if x is 0, that's going to be a problem, or that's going to get us to 0. Now, to add multiple slots, you can hit this plus button here. Notice that gives you multiple answers, or you can use the comma. It will also do it as well. So x minus 6, that's going to be a positive 6, right? To make that go to 0. And then x minus 8, I'm going to put a positive 8. Okay, so each of those numbers will cause one of these sets to go to 0. Go ahead and submit our answer here. And there's our solution. All right, so hopefully that's been helpful. Again, this is just a real quick review on factoring. I just want to show you one last thing here. Let me find a good problem that does what I'm looking for. Yes, this is a great example. All right, so real quick, let's go ahead and factor this out, and we're just going to talk about this for 1 second. So I've got 3x times x squared minus 6x minus 40. Okay. Notice in this case I've got a positive, I've got a 2 negative, so it adds up to be a negative and multiplies together to be a negative. So when we see something like that, we know that we're going to multiply together an x plus something and an x minus something. okay, because a positive and a negative multiplied to be a negative. We also know that the minus something here would be larger than the plus something because they add together to be a negative answer. So when I'm running through my factors of 40, I would do something like this. I would say, okay, let's just do the negatives as the bigger one. So 1 times negative 40, 2 times negative 20, 4 times negative 10, and then sure enough, there it is, okay? 4 and negative 10 get me to negative 6. So hopefully that's helpful. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, but this wraps up our video on factoring cubics in DeltaMath.